Okay, so you're here, we're here, and we're diving into a text that, wow, still gets people talking after
It
centuries.
really does.
You sent over those excerpts from Machiavelli's The Prince. And yeah, everyone thinks of, dark plots and whispers when they hear that name.
That's the popular image, for sure.
Uh-huh.
But the original title on principalities, it suggests something a bit more systematic, maybe.
Like he was trying to figure out the rules, the universal principles for how states are won and, crucially, held on to.
Exactly. And that's kind of our mission today, isn't it? To look past the scandalous reputation.
Yeah, and pull out some insights about power, about strategy that might actually be useful, for regular life.
Whether you're managing a team or just trying to get a project off the ground.
Right. Not a history lecture, just the core stuff you can maybe use.
Precisely. And to get Machiavelli, you really have to picture his world. We're talking 15th, 16th century Italy.
Not exactly unified, was it?
Oh, not at all. It was this patchwork of city-states. You had the
Right.
big ones, Florence, Venice, Milan, Rome, Naples, but tons of smaller places too.
All competing.
Constantly vying for influence, always under threat. It was very fluid, very dangerous, a delicate balance that kind of
Suppose
held
it didn't?
until the French invaded in 1494. Then chaos.
So high stakes all around. And it wasn't just politics as we think of it now.
Right.
Religion was mixed in.
Absolutely. The lines were incredibly blurred. You can't really separate them back then.
Like Pope Alexander VI.
Perfect example.
Hmm.
He wasn't just guiding souls. He was deep in political maneuvering, alliances, even using church powers as political tools.
Wow.
And look at Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence. His relationship with the Pope. It swung wildly depending on what was politically useful.
So pragmatism often trumped piety.
You could say that. Wealth, alliances, they often mattered more. It showed you the kind of environment Machiavelli was observing.
Okay, so in this messy, high stakes world, he's trying to find patterns, principles for holding power. And one key idea you pulled out was this quote.
Yes. Let me find it here. Winning and holding political power was possible only if a leader was ready to act outside the moral codes that applied to ordinary individuals.
Go on.
Public opinion was such, he explained, that once victory was achieved, nobody was going to put the winner on trial. Political leaders were above the law.
Okay. Heavy stuff. That sounds like a green light for bad behavior. Is that the takeaway?
Well, not exactly a license to be unethical. I think the insight for, say, navigating work is more about recognizing that the official rules aren't always the whole game.
Explain that.
It's about strategic awareness, understanding the, let's say, unspoken rules, the real power dynamics. Sometimes achieving a goal means thinking beyond the standard playbook.
So not breaking rules necessarily, but understanding how things really work.
Yes, and acting strategically based on that understanding. Maybe being more flexible or less predictable than expected if it serves the larger goal. Like in a negotiation, sticking rigidly to the rules might get you nowhere.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about playing the game smartly, not just by the book. Now, you mentioned the prince kind of shifts gears. It gets really into the psychology of leaders.
It does. Especially with Cesare Borgia. Machiavelli seems almost captivated by him.
Why Borgia? What was special about him?
Well, the early parts of the book are more analytical, categorizing states and stuff. But when he talks about Borgia, it becomes this intense, almost personal account
Of what?
of a leader who basically decided traditional morality didn't apply to him in his quest for power. Machiavelli, who was in politics but never at the very top, seems fascinated by Borgia's, well, his sheer will and ruthlessness.
Like he's studying a different species of leader.
Kind of. He's dissecting the mindset, someone operating without those usual ethical checks.
And there's a quote capturing that shift too, right?
Yes, this one. Machiavelli's attention has shifted from a methodical analysis of different political systems to a gripping and personally engaged account of the psychology of the leader who has placed himself beyond the constrictions of Christian ethics and lives in a delirium of pure power.
Delirium of pure power. Wow. Okay, so what can we learn from this focus on Borgia's mindset? How's that relevant?
It pushes us to think about motivation, right? What drove Borgia? What drives anyone aiming for big goals? Machiavelli suggests it's often this incredibly sharp focus on the objective,
Even if it means being unpopular.
even if it means making really tough calls. So for us, the insight is maybe about understanding our own drives, and that drives the people we interact with, what's really motivating actions. Knowing that helps you navigate.
Getting clear on the why.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about two big Machiavellian concepts, virtue and fortuna. They sound kind of academic.
They can, but the idea is pretty straightforward. Let's start with virtue. Forget virtue like being nice or morally good.
Oh.
For Machiavelli, virtue is about effectiveness. It's skill, courage, cunning, strength, decisiveness. Basically any quality that helps you get and keep power. It's about capability.
Got it. Like competence and drive rolled into one. What about fortuna?
That's the bit you don't control. It's luck, chance, fate. The unpredictable stuff life throws at you. Opportunities that appear, disasters that strike.
So skill versus luck, how do they fit together in his view?
That's the key interaction. He says, fortuna, luck, might give you an opening, might deal you a certain hand, but it's your virtue, your skill and readiness that lets you actually play that hand well.
So luck isn't enough on its own?
Not at all. And neither is skill if you never get a chance. He uses examples. Moses, Cyrus, Romulus. They faced tough situations. Fortuna gave them a chance, but it was their virtue, their actions, that made them successful leaders.
And there's a quote for this too.
Yep. The only part luck played was in giving them an initial opportunity. They were granted the raw material and had the chance to mold it into whatever shape they wanted. Without this opportunity, their talent would have gone unused. And without their talent, the opportunity would have gone begging.
The opportunity would have gone begging. I like that. So the actionable insight.
It's pretty direct, actually. Cultivate your virtue. Build your skills, your knowledge, your resilience, whatever applies to your goals. Be ready.
So when Fortuna smiles,
you're prepared to seize the moment. You have the virtue to act on the opportunity. It's about being ready for the lucky break. Like someone practicing guitar for years, when the chance to join a band comes up, they're ready.
Right. Preparation meets opportunity. Okay, now for maybe the most controversial bit. Cruelty versus compassion.
Yeah, this is where people often get uncomfortable with Machiavelli.
He says it's better to be feared than loved.
If you have to choose, yes. His reasoning is that love is fickle. People can withdraw it easily. But fear, specifically the fear of consequences, is a more reliable motivator for keeping subjects, or maybe team members, in line and united.
But he doesn't just say be terrifying, right? There's a limit.
Oh, absolutely. Crucially, he says avoid being hated. And the quickest way to be hated, taking people's property or messing with their honor, particularly as they're women, respect those boundaries.
So fear is okay, hatred is bad, and Borgia pops up again.
He does. Machiavelli points to Borgia's actions in the Romagna region. They seemed cruel, sure, but they brought stability and order to a chaotic place.
Better than being compassionate and letting things fall apart.
That's his argument. He contrasts it with Florence's supposed compassion in Pistoia, which he says led to disaster. Here's the quote on that.
Lay it on us.
A ruler mustn't worry about being labeled cruel when it's a question of keeping his subjects loyal and united. Using a little exemplary severity, he will prove more compassionate than the leader whose excessive compassion leads to public disorder, muggings, and murder.
Exemplary severity. Okay, so how does this apply to us non-rulers? We shouldn't go around being cruel.
No, definitely not. The insight isn't about personal cruelty. It's about recognizing that sometimes, in leadership, or even just managing a project, you have to make tough calls, decisions that might be unpopular.
Like setting firm boundaries or delivering bad news directly.
Exactly. Not shying away from necessary, difficult actions just because they might upset someone in the short term, especially if it's for the greater good or stability of the group. But always avoid causing unnecessary harm or disrespecting core values.
Right. It's about necessary toughness, not pointless cruelty. Which brings us to promises. Another tricky one.
Very tricky. Machiavelli's view is highly pragmatic.
He says keeping your word is optional.
He says it's admirable to keep promises, but great leaders haven't always achieved great things by sticking to their word when circumstances changed. Sometimes you have to be flexible.
The fox and the lion thing.
That's the one. You need to be strong like a lion to face down threats, but also cunning like a fox to recognize traps and, well, sometimes deceive.
And he had an example for this too.
Pope Alexander II again. Machiavelli basically says he was brilliant at deception, masterful at making promises and assurances he had no intention of keeping, and it often worked for him politically.
Yikes. Here's the quote on that. Those best at playing the fox have done better than the others, but you have to know how to disguise your slyness, how to pretend one thing and cover up another.
Yeah, the zinger.
People are so gullible and so caught up with immediate concerns that a con man will always find someone ready to be conned. Okay, so is the advice just lie more?
Uh-huh. No, I don't think that's the actionable bit. It's more about strategic communication and awareness. Meaning, understand that not everyone is transparent. Develop your radar for hidden agendas. And in your own dealings, be strategic. Sometimes full, blunt honesty isn't the most effective path. It's not about lying necessarily, but maybe about nuance, careful phrasing.
Like in that negotiation example, not revealing your bottom line isn't lying, it's strategy.
Precisely. It's understanding the layers of communication.
Got it. But even Machiavelli draws lines. He says rulers absolutely must avoid being hated or held in contempt. What causes those things, in his view?
He's very specific. Hatred comes from taking what people value most, their property and their honor. Don't mess with those.
That quote, again, as long as you don't deprive them of property or honor, most men will be happy enough.
Right. And contempt. That comes from appearing weak or indecisive. Changeable, superficial, fearful. The contempt, those qualities invite contempt.
So to avoid that, you need to project what?
Strength, seriousness, decisiveness, spirit. Basically, project competence and reliability. He talks about Annibale Bentivogli in Bologna. He survived a conspiracy because the people generally supported him. They didn't hate or despise him.
So the practical advice for us?
Cultivate a respectable persona. Be consistent. Deliver on what you promise when it counts. Respect people's core interests, their work, their contributions, their dignity. Build goodwill. Avoid needless antagonism.
Makes sense. Let's shift to self-reliance. He had really strong feelings about armies, didn't he? Citizen armies versus mercenaries.
Oh, very strong. He'd seen mercenaries up close in Italy and thought they were disastrous.
Why?
Because their loyalty is to money, not to the cause or the state. They're unreliable, might switch sides, might not fight hard if things get tough. He names Carmagnola, Vitelli, as examples of untrustworthy mercenary captains.
So he championed citizen armies, your own people.
Absolutely. Soldiers fighting for their own homes, their families, their ruler. That's real loyalty, real motivation, much more dependable.
And the quote on that is pretty powerful. You can't have more loyal, determined, and better soldiers than your own.
And if each man taken singly is good, when they're all together and find themselves led, fed, and respected by their own ruler, they'll be even better.
Founding an army like this is absolutely essential if we are to use Italian metal to defend ourselves against foreign enemies. Okay, so outside of actual warfare, how does this self-reliance idea apply?
It's about developing your own core strengths, your own resources. Collaboration is great, necessary even. But being completely dependent on others, whether it's one client, one skill, one connection, that's risky.
Like building your own army of skills and knowledge.
Exactly. It gives you a solid foundation, makes you less vulnerable to external shocks. Diversification, building internal capacity. That's the principle.
Okay. And Machiavelli was big on learning from the past, wasn't he? Studying history.
Hugely important for him. History was like a giant case study book.
What could you learn?
You could see what worked for great leaders. He mentions Alexander, Caesar, Scipio. And just as importantly, you could see where others went wrong, like King Louis XII of France making mistakes in his Italian campaigns.
So copy the winners, avoid the losers' mistakes.
Not just copy. Understand the principles behind their success or failure. Because, and this is crucial, times change. What worked once might not work now. You have to adapt.
Adaptability. That's key.
Absolutely. He explicitly says, the successful ruler is the one who adapts to changing times, while the leader who fails does so because his approach is out of step with circumstances. Even someone like Pope Julius II, whose impulsive nature sometimes worked, might have failed if times had been different.
So the lesson for us in our crazy, fast-changing world is...
Be a lifelong learner. Pay attention to how things are evolving. Don't get stuck in old ways just because they worked before. Be willing to adjust your strategy, your approach. Flexibility is survival.
Like businesses needing to adapt to tech or market shifts.
Precisely. Stay nimble.
Okay, nearly there. Last big topic. Choosing advisors and dealing with flattery.
Always a challenge for people in charge.
Yeah.
Machiavelli saw flatterers as poison.
Why? They just tell you what you want to hear.
Exactly, which clouds your judgment, prevents you from seeing the truth of a situation. He says you need people who will give you honest advice, even if it's critical.
But there's a catch, right?
There is. If everyone feels free to tell you the blunt truth all the time, you can lose respect, lose authority. It's a balancing act.
finding people you trust to be honest, but maintaining control.
Yes. And ultimately, he suggests, a wise ruler isn't just someone who gets good advice. Their own wisdom allows them to recognize and use good advice effectively.
And the quote nails this tension. The only way to guard against flattery is to have people understand that you don't mind them telling you the truth. But when anyone and everyone can tell you the truth, you lose respect.
It's a real dilemma.
So for us, the actionable insight.
Surround yourself with truth tellers, people you trust to be constructively critical. Be very wary of yes men or constant praise.
And work on your own judgment.
Definitely. Develop your own critical thinking so you can weigh the advice you get and make informed decisions yourself. Don't outsource your thinking.
Okay, one last concept. Fortune and free will. We touched on fortuna, luck. Does Machiavelli think we're just puppets of fate?
Not entirely. He acknowledges luck plays a huge role, maybe half of everything, he suggests. He compares fortuna to a raging river when it floods. He can sweep everything away.
It's pretty fatalistic.
But here's the key part. He says it doesn't mean we're helpless. When the river is calm, when times are good, we can build defenses.
Like flood walls.
Exactly. Banks and dikes. We can prepare, take precautions, build resilience, so when misfortune, fortuna, inevitably strikes, we're better prepared to withstand it or mitigate the damage.
And the quote captures this perfectly. It may be true that luck decides the half of what we do, but it leaves the other half more or less to us. It's like one of those raging rivers. Still, the fact that a river is like this doesn't prevent us from preparing, building banks and dikes.
It acknowledges luck, but emphasizes agency.
So the final actionable point here.
Don't be passive.
Yes.
External events impact us, sometimes massively.
Yeah.
But focus on what you can control. Build your skills, your resources, your plans, your dikes. Be proactive in managing risks and preparing for challenges.
Right. Control the controllables.
That's a good way to put it.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite a journey through The Prince, a book written for, Renaissance rulers.
But packed with insights that, surprisingly, still resonate. About power, strategy, human nature.
Absolutely. The core ideas, understanding what drives people, adapting to situations, balancing skill and luck, thinking strategically, they really do offer a different lens for looking at, well, almost anything. Career, projects, relationships sometimes.
It forces a kind of realistic, maybe even uncomfortable look at how things often work. Beneath the surface niceties, it pushes you past idealism.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about one area in your life, one goal you're pursuing. Are you relying too much on just goodwill or the official way things are supposed to work?
Yeah, and consider, what would applying a more Machiavellian perspective, meaning strategic, results-oriented, aware of the real dynamics, actually look like in that situation? How might it change your approach or the outcome?
It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Between being ethical and being effective in getting where you want to go. Something to definitely mull over.
Definitely food for thought.